you very much. I've been a farmer, I've had to be farming since the coming in
just a bit closer to the mic.
Strathalbyn, from Pridham. What a lot of people don't understand about Australia, and any catchment area, is it's a bucket. And the water has to get into the bucket before we can get it out of the bucket. Now, if you're where the water first gets in the bucket, yeah, you can have a good suck at the bucket. But what I'm considering is those at the bottom end of the bucket. Now, I can show you dams in our area that never overflowed in the 92 flood. Now, I know a lot of Alexandria Council staff went around in the 92 flood, or they wouldn't build bridges in the river like they did. But what I'm querying is, are dams going to be area-based? So if I've got 1,000 acres, I can put in 10 times bigger dam than I've got 100 acres? And is it going to be retrospective?
Okay, 2 key questions. Will it be retrospective? Will it be area-based? How many dams can you put on your property?
I'll get Martin to have a crack at it, but we're dealing with existing use, about preserving existing use, and depending on the level of resource you've got will be a determining factor as to whether there will be any further increases in dams. And as I said earlier, the Eastern Mount Lofty Ranges NRM Board is taking a precautionary principle to ensure in the first instance that we protect existing users, then to assess that resource for the future to ensure that if it can be expanded, it will be. But I think your point was a very valid one, and it's one that I said earlier about depending on where you sit in the catchment, there's either no problem or there's a significant problem. Martin?
Yes or no? Well,
so in short, I think the Western plan is the plan, there's a draft plan out, and under that plan it proposes that if you want to put in a new dam, which I believe is what you're talking about, then it's a measure of the available water against all of the existing dams there, and measuring whether or not only the total capacity of dams, but whether that dam's going in upstream of someone who already has a dam, and if it's likely there's going to be an impact there. So essentially the driving factor for any application for a new dam will be how it's likely to impact on those existing users that are already there.
The question was, is it going to be retrospective?
Will it be retrospective? So, in other words, will it be retrospective? Will it be backdated? It's a key policy decision.
Yeah, the dams that already exist, that existing users already have, will be recognised by an existing user licence. It will recognise that right to utilise water from that dam up front. That's a given. If someone then subsequently wants to construct new dams, then that'll be measured against the capacity of all of the existing dams to ensure that the new dam doesn't interfere with those existing dams. But certainly the dams you've already got will be recognised on licence if they're a dam for commercial use. I simply recognise that they're stock and domestic dams and recognise that they're there.
Okay.
I was a senator for over 15 years and I've been a farmer for over 15 years since then in the middle of the furry earth. My question is to Paul Coker, the Minister. Now, I'm opposed to measures on dams, I'm opposed to taxes on dams, and if it's put on my property, I'll go to jail. My question, Minister, is on the principle. What right has a state to interfere with dams built by farmers, maintained by farmers, managed for the good of their farm and their future by farmers? What right, by any kind of principle, has the state to interfere when there's no allocation problem? If you've got an allocation problem, perhaps you could put that case. But in 500 mini catchment areas in the Western Mount Lofty district, I've heard from these officers that there are 2 of the 500 that have got a current allocation problem. So I think, Minister, why not just accept the principle that the state isn't interfering with fresh air and isn't interfering with our dams?
Because the Shire retiring fellow should have said it's Baden Teague, a former Liberal Senator for South Australia. Thanks, Baden.
Thank you, Baden. Well, quite simply, as again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the reason we prescribed in the first instance, and prescription, of course, came in 1997, is because there has been no, but we do want to manage the entire state's resources. manage those resources in a sustainable way. Now, what Baden has said is quite true. That my understanding is that of the Western Mount Lofty region, or it might be the Eastern Mount Lofty region, I'll be corrected here, is that 98% of users won't be affected with respect to their current water allocation plan. But we also know the Western Mount Lofty is very important. $450 million supplies water supplies for Adelaide's drinking needs, which is 63% of their water needs for over 1 million people. And quite simply, it's a valuable, precious resource, just like the Murray-Darling Basin system, that needs to be managed for future generations. Simple as that.
Okay, we've got other questions here.
Got a desalination plant now, we've got plenty of water.
I'm glad you mentioned the 63% of the water that's sourced in the catchment.
Sorry.
Because I remember back in the 60s, when the farmers were all told, sorry boys, you can't subdivide anymore. And that was a good reason. Okay, we're supplying 63% of water to the 1 million people in Adelaide. They're not paying us for the privilege. In fact, ever since, we've had impost after impost put on the farmers in the Adelaide Hills, cost after cost. You can't subdivide, so if you've got 2 or 3 sons, that's it, too bad, they've got to go somewhere else. And fine, we're protecting the agricultural land, unless of course it happens to be part of the 30-year plan and now Barker and they just want to... Farming is a very hard life. It is very hard to exist on a farmer's wages. They're not like a lot of the people, or blue-collar people, whatever you like to call them. I don't want to give in much them. It's very hard. And yet all this sort of thing seems to make it harder and harder. What do we want to do? Do we want to buy our food from overseas? Or do we want local produce? I don't know. The other thing is the meters, to me, have got a familiar ring. They're for the good of everything. That's almost like the speed cameras that are for the safety. They're not for revenue. It just appalls me that it's impost after impost.
So just in summary of that is that we're concerned about uncertainty in terms of farming. There's a question here in the corner. Very quick question. We'll try and get to as many as we can towards the back. Okay, short and sharp, please.
Right, my name is Graham Fisher from Hartley. I would really like this to, what's his name up there, Martin Stokes, who I met back in 2000. Did he run you over? I am the bloke that was run over by NRM officers. True fact. On the 18th of August in 2006, on a Saturday night, at the Bremer River. And I tell you, we'd have been hit by a bus by Helionoa. And I spent 7 days in the Flinders over that, and no officer rendered any assistance to me whatsoever. It was a government vehicle, I have the number plate, with 3 people in it. And I tell you what I've been through since 2000 till right to this day has been hell from the NRM and the ministers. Not really Paul Kiker, but it goes back to John Hill's time. And I tell you what, it's not fun. Truth and trust does not exist. I'll tell you that right now. Let it work.
I think that fellow should stand up now and apologise to this man.
Exactly.
Tonight, in our vehicle, we have a pile of papers from 2000 till now to present to John Darley tonight of happenings, what happened. And I tell you what, it's a big pile. It's big of paperwork that's come from the departments and all that, and right back, the lies that's been told about the water. I am not allowed to have water out of that Bremer River for stock, domestic, irrigation, bushfires. And that is a true fact. There's been court cases. I have not attended any of them due to financial, health and representation.
Shame.
I could not afford it. and the fine that they had 8 court cases. The total fine that I got was $18,000 for the water, and plus $5,000 for hindering officers. On that night, I never hindered an officer. When you've been hit by a vehicle, you're not out there to hinder an officer. Now, another thing comes into this.
Graham, I might have to ask you.
There's another thing comes into this. On the night that the officers raided me, the pump was not in working order. Now, how can I be taking water from that Bremer River and be charged for a pump that was not taking water? The pump's mechanical seal was faulted because what I did, on the neighbouring property, I was being observed for 6 weeks. 3 weeks into it, I worked it out, something was going on. And as it was, I went and changed the pump just prior to the raid. And of course, that just shows you how much out of touch those officers are. The lies that they have in their written sworn statements is just unbelievable.
His nickname is Lolly, but he's never hosted Countdown. Now,
We don't need this passed over. This is last.
No. Right, very quickly, sorry.
I'd just like the Minister to give a undertaking that he will supply any data requested by landholders regarding service water capacity and allocation process. Here I am. And also, is the policy in place for the government to auction water, if they so choose? And I don't mean to kick you when you're down, but this is a copy of the draft water allocation plan, and it clearly states you will need a water allocation take roof for irrigation purpose, regardless of the volume take.
All right, so some technical issues there, whether Minister or... Well, no, there's policy and technical issues there, so...
I would like you to, and I apologise for this, can you just tell me the questions again, because I did have a bit of difficulty.
Okay, one.
Thank you.
Would you give a public guarantee that you will give access to all information and data relating to surface water capacity and water allocation plan to any landholder requested? That's one. Two is has the government got policy in place, if they so choose as an option, to auction unallocated water? And thirdly, you want to read?
Look, with the first question, if we're to undertake what is a serious process, and bearing in the Eastern Mount Lofty Ranges area, that it is still an information gathering exercise, and I presume that the draft will be finalised pretty soon. But the answer to that is yes. How is it that we can make a decision without making sure that ultimately the information that decision is being based on isn't shared with people? It has to be shared with people.
You've never had access. That's been the problem all along.
So just repeat the question. Will the information be available for landowners?
Yeah, well, the information that's based on the decision-making process is stuff that I believe needs to be available, needs to be transparent. Otherwise, we'll have meeting after meeting in halls like this. I said that's...
Yes. Yes, say yes.
On the Western, there's already 40 reports that are available on the internet, and they're available. If people don't have access to the internet, we'll provide that. With respect to the Eastern, I expect that a similar process will be followed that allows for transparency of that information to be made available to people. Well,
the information is not available to people
because
water management zone.
Yeah,
sorry,
and if farmers are going to have an argument with one that they've made a mistake on, and your department is dealing with one now, which you asked Martin.
Sorry, I'm just concerned that we're going to...
The process that
so I'm just asking when you give the landholders, direct your staff to give them open access to all the data and information that you have got.
Well, the information...
With that alignment,
All right, so the question's about open access.
No decisions have been made in the Eastern Mount Lofty Ranges, but I expect, well, on the Western Mount Lofty regions, there's 40 reports that are readily available to people who want them.
no, the reports are
but the data is not. I can guarantee you, I've got a letter here. It took me nearly a year to get information from a visit to
my view is certainly as the Minister, in the process of water allocation planning, bearing in mind that, as I said earlier, I sit on top of all this, that information, the data that's used to provide that information will be available. Yes, yes. Well, look, I expect you to be engaged in such a way that the information that's being used to make any decision, when that decision is made, will be shared with you. That's my expectation. Okay. Well, I just said yes. Okay. I think I said yes.
Okay. I think there's been some frustration in getting some data. The Minister answered yes. So, and I think the Minister will advise you to be available at the end of the meeting. That's right. Just a lady here that I promised a quick question.
My name is Judy. I live in Ross Valley. I'm one of the Ross Valley Council rates. I pay the levy for the Adelaide Hills water. If the government's really concerned about the water and the producers in the Hills region and there not being enough water and metering it, why then, despite the objections of residents in the Hills and the producers that there was not enough water, not enough infrastructure, and removing production land and pastoral and agricultural, that the government rode straight over the objections and have allocated for urban sprawl near Mount Barker space for 20,000 new building sites? Where's the water coming from for them?
Thank you very much for the
population's grown and the reservoirs haven't.
Quite simply, in regard to the population growth that will occur as a result of the 30-year plan, arrangements obviously have to be in place to make sure that, amongst other communities. Now, dams, of course, are totally climate dependent, aren't they? And
so is the River Murray.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. And that's why the decision was made to build a desalination plant in a desalination plant, of course, is independent of climate and rainfall, and there's an insurance policy because there's 9 follow days, and you know up here that we will confront a drought of the same proportions that we experienced from 2002 through to the current time. Thank you very much for your questions.
There's a couple of questions in the top section. Very quickly, thank you.
Hello, my name is Tim D. I've got a qualification in natural resource management and I am a farmer. I've read these plans, the draft and the complete plan, and I have a couple of concerns. Firstly, Minister, you said that a farmer would be getting something out of this by being allocated a licence. We are allocated a water allocation at the moment going to a licence. However, I consider this a very stupid thing to do for the sake of this country. Because if I, as a farmer, I have a productive piece of land and I run it very well, if I suddenly have a bad day, as farmers have, and I know farmers because I know lots of them and they're all my friends, we have bad days, as everyone does, but we are self-employed. And in times of desperation, that water licence becomes an attractive, saleable item for me to get myself out of the mire for the short term. However, what happens to the productivity of my land once I have sold it to the highest bidder, be that China, overseas, or anybody else, my neighbour down the road? What happens to that piece of Australia? It's stuffed. concern I have from reading all these documents is there is a potential that this water and the value that farmers then create on paying for water then can put a value on water for the Adelaide reservoirs. Once you've got a tangible value on those water in those reservoirs, can they be sold to the highest bidder? This doesn't stop just with farmers. This is the big picture. Now, there's also in this plan, it talks about how they can reduce farmers' allocations at the decision of the minister at the time. Now, is this because somebody's bought Mount Bold and they're guaranteed a certain quantity of water, therefore they cannot actually get water out of a farmer's dam in a drought, but they can take their allocation and make up the difference from a desalinisation plant, therefore guaranteeing to the highest bidder a certain quantity of water for the Adelaide supply. And just more personally on my own questioning, as a question of concerns, is you say stock and domestic is not going to be metered, but what if your dam is above 5 megalitres and you're providing water out of that dam to stock and domestic? Thank you.
Okay, no more questions there.
Look, I beg your pardon? Okay, so I apologise. Look, I've shared the same dilemma on occasions with respect to providing, if you like, a tradable right for water, but it's something that we've done across the length and breadth of this state and will continue to do that. Then it will be a matter of the landowner, irrespective of their personal circumstances, to make a determination as to what they're going to do with their property right. And look, part of the reason that me being here tonight is to hear those concerns, and the concerns that you've expressed, and the process that's involved is one for you to feed into it, to make sure that we do address issues that arise through this process.
Paul, will the tradability be within an area or outside the area?
It would all depend, Nick. It will depend on how much is what the level of allocation is within that particular area, but certainly we want tradable rights that will shift water to where it can best be used, and that tradability is something that's very important in all water allocation plans and needs to underpin the Murray-Darling Basin plan ultimately as well.
So will it be local? Or
it can go from areas to areas, but there will be rules and guidelines that say how this should operate, depending on the nature of the resource.
All right, please just one question, because we've got a lot of people.
Amy Williams from Parrawell, where we have a lot of swamps, and landholders with designated swamps are subject to some of the most draconian rules in the Western Mount Lofty's draft plan. Now, if I thought those rules were well-founded and necessary for the protection of our swamps, I don't think I'd be standing here. So the question is to the Minister, when your own department's monitoring figures have shown catchments in our region, or sub-catchments within our region, recording runoff in the order of 5 times the natural levels, how can you justify imposing these costs on our communities, and probably costs on swamps as well?
Thank you very much for your question, Amy. As I mentioned earlier, there's probably 4 outstanding issues that relate to the Western Mount Lofty Ranges water allocation plan. The swamps is one of them, and we're working through that. The point I would make, as well, is that we deal with the resource, as a whole, and we can't measure down to microclimates within various areas. But I've had a meeting with Parrawell irrigators. I've given an undertaking to Michael Pengelly, to visit their scene. But as I understand it, Amy, those discussions are ongoing, and that's one of the outstanding issues that needs to be resolved.
Okay, 2 very short questions at the top there, and then we've got the gentleman over there said stand up. We'll try and get to as many people as we can. Sally?
Thank you. Is it working?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Again, it appears to me that the rural South Australia is becoming sacrificial lamb for water for South Adelaide and its benefits. It amazes me when I consider that the Premier just announced a big expansion of Mount Barker Did he put in that expansion, his 30-year plan as to where he's going to find this water? Or we're going to shut down small dams? How can someone put a plan up without really making the thing tick and covering all the dots and ticks? Furthermore, with this new development, why aren't houses nowadays at least having to have 12, 14,000 gallon rainwater tanks put on? This is a major cost to the towns because of water, runoff, etc., and yet the stuff's just going to waste. It's an absolute unforgivable. The state government again has failed to do its bit like the River Torrens. Why hasn't it got its backside and done something serious about that water so all the parks are now they can be run properly without sucking the guts out of the River Murray? And again, where does the River Murray depend on? This coming out of these dams and all other people using water. It amazes when I think I go back to the days of statesmen like this Thomas Bayfords and etc. Lisa's dam.
If I've got a dam and I've got a measurement on it and I've got an allocation, does that mean once I've used my allocation I have to turn off my pump? Yes. And then the water in my dam just goes up into the sky. Because where's it going to go? And the second thing is, are they doing all of this in New South Wales and Queensland and Victoria? Because I'm sick of us always wearing the problem.
Thank you very much for your question. Yes, the water allocation plans are a national issue and they are being dealt with in other states under national water initiatives where states are responsible for managing their water resource. And irrespective of whether there were national water initiatives, we as a state should be managing our most precious resource in the driest state, the driest continent, as Isabel said earlier, that we manage it and that we manage it in an effective, efficient way for future generations to be able to exploit. Now, with respect to your particular question, if there's an allocation and an allocation is provided, but I'm not sure whether your dam is domestic or stock and domestic or for other irrigation purposes. If you have a stock and domestic dam, that won't be licensed and you can collect that water if it's used for other purposes, and that's all still dependent upon whether and how allocations are worked out and whether or not, if you like, there will be some reductions of current use reductions. It will also affect SA Water as well in regard to how much water they can take. Now that's being worked through and I look forward to working, and my departments look forward to working with the community to manage this thing.
Is there a leader on Poppy Station?
Good evening. My name is Bressington. My question, I suppose, is to you, Mr. Baker. Now, you've been talking about water and its sustainable management, and at the same time I can see that you've taken water as natural resource and you've put it on the commodity market as a trading commodity. How does this link up to the sustainability in its use? That's number one. And second, we've been listening to the view of the old farmers, second, third, fourth generation. How about the new farmers? If someone wants to get into farming now, this is not an easy task. Have anyone thought about this? Why the government, you guys, made the water commodity and now let it on the market? Why not manage it sustainably?
Yes. Well, thank you very much. And of course, it provides and bestows a property right on people, and that property right is their right to do as they see fit with that. They can sell it if they like. But I do take on your point about new entrants into the marketplace with respect to farming and the impact that will have, because of course I presume that people in this room that will sell their farm will either sell it with the water attached to it, which will increase the price of that, or indeed, if they so choose, sell their water elsewhere, and then there would be a reduction in that productivity of that land. But again, you know, I'm not going to tell, nor will I be bold enough to tell people about once they've got their property right, that is water, how they should manage that themselves.
It's got a... Sorry, one... of the questions that's been asked back there was asked privately, will the government actually be in a position to auction water rights?
Oh, right, yes, yeah. Well, look, it would depend on how much water is available. So the process under water allocation plans is this: to guarantee supply for existing users, then to determine those other people who are existing users but might have actually had that existing use recognised through this process. If afterwards there's additional water available, that, if we look at the Eastern Mount Lofty, will be a precautionary approach, and then later there will be, if that's the case, water available. Whether it be an auction or not, I would say, you know, that quite simply, it would be the marketplace that would determine the price of that. If there is excess allocation, and that allocation is, if you like, controlled by the government, there would be a price put on that. But they're things that we need to work through a little bit more carefully. What we want to do is make sure that we don't over-allocate. If there's room for more water to be made available, we need to work through the processes as how that can best occur.
Mr. Kager, Bernard Booth. If you own a Crown lease pastoral holding, the pastoral officers make an appointment to come on the land, even though it's Crown land. They show courtesy and respect to the pastoral station owners. You spoke earlier quite rightly about respect to the public servants. By the same token, respect to the landholder. The legislation proposes $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 fines for people coming onto the land without an appointment. A little bit roughshod, we heard earlier from Graham Fisher. The fact of the matter is, if they refuse to answer a question put by the officer, a $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 fine is proposed in the legislation, and there was something went through the lower house the other day that you're aware of. Secondly, Mount Bowl Reservoir, your government announced that it was going to be enlarged. A little bit on top adds about 50% or so to the capacity. The last 2 years it's gone out, taking out the year before last heaps of River Murray water that was pumped there by the taxpayer. Finally, therefore, why hasn't Mount Bowl been expanded as well?
Thank you. In answer to your first, I'll deal with the second one so I can think what the first one was again. But in regard to the second one, a decision was made. You're quite right to expand, if you like, the Mount Bowl Reservoir. Of course, reservoirs are climate dependent. And a decision was made to put resources into a desalination plant, which will be an insurance policy against any future droughts. Quite simply, the idea of an expansion for Mount Bold isn't off the agenda, but it's going to be. It is not off the agenda. If you look at Water for Good 2030, there will still be an ongoing review about reservoir capacities within the Mount Lofty range. Now, your first question again was
about the tax, about the power of.
Oh right, yes.
Huge fine.
Yeah, okay. Look. I want any information that's available, and I heard Mr Fisher earlier here today, I want any information that's available that says that the NRM officers aren't acting appropriately or accordingly. Their powers are no different from those powers that the fisheries inspectors have, that occupational health and safety inspectors have, that work cover inspectors have, that Safe Work SA inspectors have. But it's my expectation as a government that those powers will be used appropriately. What we want from our NRM officers, and I've seen it on Eyre Peninsula, I've seen it in the southeast, I've seen it in the north, and it exists elsewhere, as we want NRM officers to be the interface with the community to make sure that that any information that they have is actually valued by that community. Now, if you've got examples of where those powers haven't been used appropriately, I want to know about it. That's what my expectation is, and I thank you for those questions.
And I would simply like to quote from the Rural Action Movement News, dated the 20th of the 10th, 99. On the 21st of March 98, the federal government signed an agreement in the United Nations that all nations should be imposed a charge on the use of God-given water. In the same article, it said on the 23rd of March 98, it was made in Paris meeting of the United Nations members that an agreement that fresh water was to become a commodity and this should be taken as a warning that freshwater supplies worldwide will be price controlled by the speculators in the futures market. In its original report to IPAC, Independent Pricing Regulatory Tribunal, it's just a comment, please. Well, I'll ignore that then. They have even gone further to assess the value of irrigated crops, assessing each crop's ability to pay for water. For example, dairies to pay $330 per megalitre for irrigated. Vineyards, $2,600 per meg. Lucerne growers, $62. Farm dams will have level gauges to record increase in dam levels after rain, but no allowance made for evaporation. And I'd like to further comment that Gail Gago, a couple of months ago, said there would be no charge for rainwater this parliamentary session. What about next one?
Is the gentleman who's at the end there, you just pass the mic to? Short question. Yeah, it's right, speak close to the mic.
Yeah, it's on? Yeah, good. I'm nobody, but I look at what's going on and I think about these poor farmers being taxed on that. I think you're extremely rude not answering that gentleman's question before about the amount of stormwater runoff that goes into St Vincent's Gulf. If you spent your money, didn't put the desal plant up like leading scientists had actually been advising the government for years, but the backdoor deals done behind people's back in Parliament and behind closed doors of big industry who want to control the water, that's what's really going on. The amount, you know, they talk about the water going out, the amount that's going out to the Gulf has wrecked the Gulf. The scientific information says if we catch all that water, you wouldn't have to have these meters on your dams and being charged for all this water that's free. They built the desal plant because there was deals done behind the doors, behind people's backs to get it up and running. It was all about dollars. That gentleman who just spoke there is absolutely correct that in the United Nations, what was coming, there was either going to be wars on water and air, and it was going to become a very scarce commodity. What they want to do, the powers above even these people, is take that right off you. We need to stand up and fight. If you don't stand up to yourselves, you'll be railroaded all the way down the railway line. I'm nobody.
Look, I apologise if I gave the impression that I was rude and not answering any particular question, and I apologise if that's the impression I gave. In regard to stormwater, I mean, we do have a plan. It's a little bit more complex than just being able to capture every piece of stormwater in times when it rains. We have a five-year event, 1 in 10, 1 in 20, 1 in 30. But I'll just let you know that by 2014 we will have collected and have the capacity to collect 23 gigalitres of stormwater for the purposes of re-injecting into the aquifer and storage. The plan in Water for Good is to have 65 gigalitres within the metropolitan area, with another 15 or it might be 17 in rural areas. So we're working on diversifying our water supplies. Diversifying our water supplies is managing stormwater in the best way we can, managing wastewater in the best way we can, and ensuring that we do reduce the draw on the more traditional forms of water that are climate dependent.
Okay, a couple of questions here on the side. Connie?
Andrew Jensen from Parawa. Question for Kim Good. Do you recognise that runoff from cleared land is actually 4 to 5 times greater than that from native scrubland, and therefore our swamps are actually wetter now than they were 50, 60 years ago? And also a comment for the Minister, the Murray-Darling Basin Authority are actually buying the water back for environmental flows. Why don't we fit into that category if we're forced to give water to the environment?
Thank you. On the first question, as I mentioned earlier, some of the numbers down at Para, that has been raised quite, as you would be aware, quite strongly. People have met with the Minister, so we're looking at Para numbers again. Yes, we do recognise change in land use means change in runoff. Sorry, the second question, briefly.
More a question for the Minister. The Murray-Darling Basin Authority are compensating landholders and it's a voluntary buyback system. We're looking at only getting 10% of our runoff figures at NRM Board's current scheme. So the rest is going for environmental flows. Why shouldn't we be compensated?
Well, what's occurred in the Murray-Darling Basin is that all water has been allocated, indeed significantly over-allocated, and there is no choice but to buy back. What we are trying to do in the Western Mount Lofty Ranges and eventually in the Eastern is to ensure that we have an orderly allocation of water, that by and large we allocate water prior to over-allocation, and there won't, and that allocation will have regard to the environment, so there will be no need to buy water back. It'll be allocated.
So if there's a landholder that you believe's got too much water now, will he be compensated?
I'm not sure what you mean by having too much water.
Well, if your figures deem that I'm taking too much runoff.
The intent of the water allocation plan, if available water, if there is available water, it's to provide each user with their reasonable enterprise requirements. So you will get the water you need if there is water available for existing users. So having too much water is not part of the process. It's not like the water.
Okay, thank you. Let's keep moving.
Yeah, my name's Neil Herman. I just want to reflect back on some of this water allocation. The rain falls equally on everyone's land. Everyone should be entitled to a water allocation. I'd just like to reflect back about 30 odd years ago. I had land down in the southeast that I was working on. Those who had a bore and was using that water, they were given an allocation of what they had. Now, if you had the money, you put the bore down and you irrigated. If you're on hard times, you couldn't afford to get your bore set up and irrigation going, you missed out. Now all of a sudden, this water has money attached to it. So those that had the bore just got richer. And those that couldn't are just still poor. So you need to think very carefully about the value you put on water and it being a commodity that can be sold, because it really isn't right. It's not an equitable thing for society.
Right.
My question really follows on from the one that's just been asked. If you have a 50-hectare property in a 500mm rainfall area, average for the Adelaide Hills, let's say, then 250 megalitres of rain falls on that property every year. If you have no water allocation or no licence, you will be allowed to have 5 megalitres, that is to say 2% of the rain that falls on your property, you'll be allowed to use for stock and domestic use. Now my question is a simple one, it's a yes or no answer. Is that fair, Minister?
Look, I can't give a yes or no, and I apologise. We're about ensuring that existing users and the existing users of water will have security in the future. I think you've asked a very, very good question, and it's been raised with me before. It's about the role of dry land farming, if you like, and what entitlement there is in regard to their water. It's an issue that's been raised with me. Water allocation plans about ensuring we have existing users and the protection of existing users into the future.
The answer required was yes or no. You didn't answer the question.
Is it fair or not? I mean, I want you to assist me in determining through this process. Well, is it also not fair, based on the previous questions, that, and this might be a bridge too far, that you don't want a property right within this area, and if we are to allocate water, we do it under a permit system that then can't be a property right. Is that what everyone wants? I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer. What we've done in other areas is licensed. And that's appropriate because it actually reflects, and that licence reflects your current use and provides you with that security for that current use.
Minister, yeah, we've got a small property outside Strathalbyn. We've got meters there. Once everybody's metered, can you guarantee that we're not going to start getting charged per meg or whatever the quantity is? Not just for the yes or no.
Could you repeat the question, please? Will it be charged?
Okay, I'll start again. Once we are metered, are you, the government of this day, going to start charging us at some time for the water that we use per meg? I'd just like a yes or no.
There will be.
Oh, sir, I just asked a yes or no.
All right. Depends on whether your water is being used for stock or domestic. So yes in some circumstances and no in others.
Of course we're going to get charged.
Brett and Sherry, Strawberry Golf and Kaipo. Brett and Sherry, Strawberry Golf and Kaipo. Ed Strawberry Golf from McLaren Vale. Can you guarantee me, I employ 80 people, that in 1 year or 5 years I will still have enough water to grow my 25 hectares of strawberries at Cochrane?
The objective is yes.
Okay. You ask Martin Stokes what happened in McLaren Vale, where water allocation is about 6 megs per hectare to grow strawberries. McLaren Vale, we got 1.1. I had to shift out. It cost me $1 million to shift from McLaren Vale to Cochrane. Right? What are you going to do with water allocations for these people if they're growing whatever crop they're growing, and you give them half the water they need?
Yeah, good on you.
Yeah.
Listen to us.
Thank you for your question. I'm here listening.
Okay, Peter Manuel's got a question.
Yeah, Minister, can you explain to the people here tonight what this document means?
What? I need to put my glasses on. I think Minister relates the privilege against self-incrimination. That's what.
I'll explain it if you can.
I understand entirely what it means.
Well, explain it in layman's terms.
Well, essentially, through amendments to the NRM Act, there was a proposal amendment that talked about the, if you like, the enforceability, that is, the forcing of people to answer questions. I mean, it is clear to me that that actual clause may have a bit of difficulty getting through the upper house, and I've given a commitment to Mitch Williams that we would review that particular clause through the passage between houses. Now, the other point that I would make also is this, that I actually thought the thrust behind it was quite reasonable. That is, that if there... No, let me finish. If there was something of a significant nature that was a health and safety threat or a threat to that resource, we could help you to say, I'm demanding you answer that question. That's what was being proposed. Now, quite simply, it was also going to be that when you answered that none of the statements that you made could be used against you in a court of law. And it's clear to me, it's clear to me that this amendment is going to have some difficulty. I'm here listening tonight, and I always listen, and I've told Mitch that I will further discuss that with Mitch and others during the passage of that through the other house.
I'll let the people know here tonight in layman's terms what it means, that document. What it means is a rape or a murderer has got more rights than what we have as farmers or food producers. They have the right to remain silent, we haven't. This gentleman here, he put the bill up, he got it passed through the lower house, and you reckon you're a reasonable sort of a person? A murderer and a rapist have got the right to remain silent and we haven't? I think you need a mental examination.
We've been told that we have to install meters and that we have to pay for the meters and pay for the installation of the meters. Now, nowhere in the Act does it say that we have to do the meters or that we have to pay for them and pay for the installation. And in fact, the Act reveals that meters do not have to be installed, that the Minister can supply the meters. So why then have we been told by the Board of the Department that we have to pay for them? That's not true.
The state metering policy is such that the landowners will be required to cover the costs involved with those meters. And that's the state policy. That's as it's existed in the southeast. That's as it's existed in the Clare area. That's how it's existed in the Barossa Valley. That's how it's existed across the length and breadth of the state that's under a water allocation plan.
Okay. Gentleman over there. Very short, please.
Speak up, there you go. I'm not allowed enough people to hear me anyway. In 2002, the Labor government closed down a few websites relating to issues like this, and there was a legislation passed allowing the major building trade, highways and major infrastructure projects to be able to take water from any resource they like, any amount they like, without charge. Will that be being addressed?
Thank you for the question. It's one of the issues that was raised during the passage of legislation. Again, Mitch Williams raised that, and really, and I'm not speaking on behalf of Mitch, it wasn't so much a matter of that being available, but it was the transparency of that and how much water was taken, so that we would get an understanding about how much was being taken in the context of a resource as a whole. And if I recall, Mitch, I gave an undertaking to pursue that particular matter as well.
Okay, gentleman here. Hi, Gerard Hauser from Kangaroo Island. I'm involved in a different sort of farming, which is aquaculture. So my fish will be considered as stock, is that correct?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
It's pretty simple, so I'll just explain again. I'm involved in aquaculture, yes. And according to the rules, stock is non-taxable, whatever you're going to do to us. So my fish are stock, therefore I have no problem with my dams, is that correct?
You're doing land-based, the marron. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a commercial exercise, is the way I understand it. Martin, answer that for me, please. Hey, look. It was a good question, and I've eaten your marron, and I like them very much, and I hope that we give you enough water to make sure you continue to grow.
I think next year you'll be getting it from China. People in the world, Chinese. And my last thing is a comment, and the comment is Margaret Thatcher said that in socialism, when you run out of other people's money, you have to tax higher. And Mr. Xenophon, I have a question for you on a federal basis. Are there no constitutional rights to farmers and their water allocations? I'm sure some things that are passed on us are not constitutional. That's my question.
Look, I'll go first. I'm advised here that it would be about size and impact. Smaller operations won't be impacted on. If it's a significant large enterprise that has an impact on that from an agriculture's perspective, it would be measured.
The gentleman also wanted to ask, does BHP Billiton pay for their water at Roxby?
That's a large enterprise. Yeah.
Okay. Look, BHP Billiton have an indenture, and the indenture was actually developed some time ago. That indenture is being reviewed at this current point in time. They have a commitment to build a desal plant, which will reduce its draw on the Great Artesian Basin.
Okay. All right. And answer to your question, under the Commonwealth Constitution, if you acquire someone's asset, you must give just compensation. Under state laws, you don't have to, and that applies to all the states, basically.
My name is Susan, and I just wanted to say, I think you fellas have done a fairly reasonable job tonight. I'm not in agreement with what you're doing, but in the farmer's eyes, I think you're all underqualified for the job because you do not have the life experience needed to help these farmers do what they need to do for our own state.
I thank you very much for your comments, and it was a privilege of my life to be the Agricultural Minister of this state for that 12-month period. But the last time I also recall too that some of the best ministers, if you like, that have served in agriculture, I'm not suggesting that I was in that category, did not come from a farming background.
Okay, now there's a question over the top there, Sally.
Excuse me.
Phil Merrill, Strathalbyn. I'm not a farmer, but it looks to me like what Isabel Redmond had to say is that there's not a great basis behind what you're doing, but she is correct in what's happening and what happened in my law, where people are pumping water up to one dam, down to the other, and pumping it back and getting charged. The same thing's happening here in Langhorne Creek. You have a lot of farmers that paid to be, or grape growers, who paid to be on the water scheme. They pay for water whether they use it or not. This year was a great year. We had lots of rain, so they didn't use their allocation, but they still had to pay. So, being good farmers or grape growers, they pumped it into the aquifers underground. What does the government do? Get our inboard. They're going to charge them to get that water back out again. That's it. They paid for it once and now they're going to pay for it twice. It appears to me, and I think it needs to be said, that our inboard are really just building a castle of their own. With what you're doing to farmers, you're putting the prices up, you're charging them for water. What effect is it going to have on Australian exports? We're getting more imports, farmers are producing less. We've already lost our industry, that's all gone, footwear, clothing. Now we're going to persecute the farmers. I think that you are part of a greedy, tax-grabbing government.
Thank you. Can I just say this is about the saddest thing this NRM board has done for a long time. There's such a big impact made in relationships with farmers and the environment, the learning process. My experiences with Landcare over 7 years. I was Landcare manager for 7 years and also worked on the Southern Hills Soil Conservation Board. And the gap that is there now is not repairable under this system. So many farmers became environmentally aware and spent a lot of money on rehabilitation of creeks and so on. But my question is, how can you allocate any, this is to the NRM, how can you allocate any water based on dam capacity, which is the basis of your allocation, from guesswork with your tape and measuring stick? The only accurate capacity figure is attained with a formula, that measurement of size and degrees on new and empty dams. You cannot make a law, Minister, under guesswork and inaccuracies. You cannot measure water with a half-full dam, silted dam, just by measurement with what you're doing now. The only way is to empty dam and then you can measure. There's a formula there and it cannot be done the way you're doing. So it's all inaccurate and guesswork.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I do understand formulas used for dams, but silt is an issue and I expect that we take certain things into account.
Right, let's just go to the back of the hall here, because people have been waiting very patiently and we're running out of time, so...
This is Pam Migadeli from Waiponga. We're dairy farmers, 3 generations. We live in the basin there, in the flats. Quite often we see the floodwaters that go through and they go straight out to sea. Question, what metre have you got enforced for the reservoir?
For which reservoir, Pam?
Waiponga Reservoir, the Waiponga Dam.
Yeah, yeah.
The water goes straight out to sea when it's in flood. Billions and billions of litres go out there.
When it spills?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I agree, it does. allocation, and they'll require an allocation as they will for the rest of their eastern Mount Lofty reservoirs. And if there are any cuts to, if you like, existing water use, and that's still to be determined, SA Water will play its part in those cuts as well.
Okay, gentlemen.
Will it be 25% of surface water capacity?
Just a comment, I'm in touch with a number of people who do work in the water industry, and I do know that the monitoring of groundwater is difficult enough, yet let alone the monitoring of surface water with evaporation